Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today we have a very exciting interview. We will be discussing environmental toxins in personal healthcare products and the home. Today I am joined with one of St. John Fisher College's favorite professors and two of her very best students. So I will allow them to introduce themselves now.
So I am Mary Stone. As I told my students at the beginning of the semester, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not approaching these toxins from a scientific perspective, but in terms of from a consumer perspective. And what I was before I became a professor, normally I teach writing at St. John Fisher, and journalism. I'm doing this course because of a personal experience. I developed breast cancer, which wasn't genetic. It was due to environmental toxins. And then in addition to that, I'm an investigative journalist. And, these two things combined to help me investigate what was in my environment and what led to my cancer. And I've been sort of sharing my findings with students this semester. We've been talking about the EPA and the FDA and the limits of their power and resources in deeming products and chemicals safe for manufacturers. And so it's sort of up to consumers to educate themselves and be very discerning in terms of the products they let into their home. And so that's what we've been working on this semester so far.
Yes, so then my name is Lauren Willing. I am a senior at St. John Fisher College. I'm studying Spanish and International Relations. So this class was kind of out of my comfort zone. I'm not a science person, so it's been good that it's been from kind of the consumer side of the toxic story, but that's a bit about me. I was interested in this class and participating because my mom is a very homeopathic person. So she is definitely someone who has educated herself on toxins in our consumeristic market society for quite a while now. And obviously it's a topic that's trending now, something people are taking interest in, and we're seeing kind of the repercussions of. So that's why I wanted to do kind of my own research and education. So it's great that Fisher was offering this class in my last semester. So that's kind of a little bit of my background on the subject. And I'm excited to talk to everybody about it today.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a sophomore here at Fisher, and I'm a nursing student. Kind of why I took interest in this class was I had severe allergic reactions for the past couple of years. I've been to doctor after doctor. I really couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I finally got allergy tested this past summer, and I'm pretty much allergic to everything in the world, like dust, dirt, mold, pollen, pretty much anything outside. But I found even in my house, or even anytime I kind of switched type of environments that I was in, I was breaking out really bad and getting hives and really bad headaches. So I've kind of attributed that to the different products I've used. And since taking this class, I've kind of learned what works best for me and what doesn't. And that's different for everyone. It's really all about kind of a trial and error process. But it's really interesting to me to kind of figure out why these products have made me react the way they have and what I can do to help other people who are having maybe similar issues. So it's just kind of a good insight to educate myself and other people.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And I am Andy Sigelski, and I will be the lucky interviewer who gets to learn a lot more today. So our first question is for Professor Stone. Can you just tell us about your story? How did you learn about the toxins in the products that we use?
Well, it was not just due to my breast cancer diagnosis, but it was also due to thyroid disease, and then a problem with a shampoo and conditioner product that I used, and a class action suit I joined as a result, that helped me realize that the products that we buy, we want to believe are safe. And they're actually, there's nothing that guarantees they are. And so, and there's no one sort of reference we can use to find out what's safe and what's not. And so I little by little, as time permits, I have sort of tried to edit my lifestyle and the consumer choices I make to try to improve my thyroid disease and to prevent a recurrence of cancer. It's we found in this class that you could dive down a rabbit hole trying to protect yourself from all of the toxins in the environment. There are toxins in our furniture, in our clothes, in our rugs, in flooring, in the glue, in certain furniture, particle board furniture that we buy, flame retardants in upholstery. There are toxins in our tap water that the EPA deems safe, but other environmental groups say aren't safe. And then there are also these toxins in cleaning products, household products. But what we've been looking at a lot and how we started the semester was looking at personal care products. So that's sort of what got me interested in understanding the toxins we use. And I've been trying to get the word out as a journalist, but it's very exciting to get to talk to students and share what I've learned with them.
Perfect. And I feel like there's a lot of our audience might have the same question. Doesn't the FDA regulate all of these chemicals and products?
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, they're very, their power, their reach, and their resources are limited. And, even legislation that's passed to try to make regulations more stringent, how those regulations are enforced always depends on the administration. So even when there are advancements from consumer groups, and trade associations advocating for consumers to try to get the FDA to do a better job, their hands are, and even with their willingness to do a better job, their hands are tied, depending on how progressive the administration is. And the current administration is not very progressive. And as a result, a lot of chemicals that were slated to be analyzed and tested were pushed through just to facilitate the manufacture of some dangerous chemicals in our products. These chemicals, I don't want to demonize them because they do render our products extremely effective. And they're definitely cheaper for manufacturers to produce. But over time, over years, exposure to some of these chemicals can result in things like infertility, asthma, developmental delays in children, certainly problems with hormone production and regulation. I mean, there seems to be no end to the effects that can happen. And the FDA relies on manufacturers to do the appropriate testing to make sure their chemicals are safe. But, they have sort of they balance things with risk and cost. And so Europe, by contrast, does test every chemical before it goes into manufacture, and we don't have that. So the FDA doesn't do anything until there's some public outcry. If there's some sort of major problem and a lot of complaints get filed, then they can start sort of a process to investigate and deliberate. But even that process, once it is finally launched, can take years. And in the meantime, those products continue to be sold. And so then even after a product has been researched and even after a facility has been toured interviews have been done by a manufacturer and the FDA. Those, even after all of that, it's very hard to prove, to connect a certain chemical or toxin with a particular disease. So we're not very protected, as we found out in this class.
So kind of going off of your last answer, the regulations do vary a little bit in different countries.
Yes. So in Europe, for instance, they have an approach called the precautionary principle. It's sort of looking at, it's sort of a better safe than sorry approach, which just means that the manufacturers have to prove to the European Union authorities that their products are safe. Whereas in the US, the ingredients that manufacturers put in their products are considered safe until someone proves that they're not safe. So we sort of have very opposite approaches.
What was the product that you were most surprised about that was filled with toxins?
I would have to say I would be interested to hear what the students have to say to this, because I don't have a certain product, but I do have like a segment of products like bottled water. I know we're talking about personal care products, but for me personally, what is most alarming is to see that bottled water is really less safe than tap water. Environmental groups urge people not to use bottled water for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's not regulated in the same way that tap water is regulated. So if a source of water has some sort of contaminant in it, bottled water companies are not required to report it to anybody, whereas municipalities do have to report it to the EPA and to state authorities. The other thing is that often bottled water is just bottled tap water. So it's water that's been treated and filtered with tax dollars you've already paid. So you're basically double paying for your water. But some waters are just really, especially, the other thing that I talk about with students, we talk about plastics and how dangerous those can be if they're exposed to extreme heat or extreme cold, how the chemicals that soften the plastic can leach into the liquid that they hold. And if we don't know in what kind of temperatures bottled water was transported or stored, if it was stored in extreme heat, then whatever the bottled water is, even if it is tested and proven to be a very safe bottled water, without knowing exactly what kind of environmental conditions it's maintained before it reaches your body, no one can know if it's safe. And so that was, anytime I drink bottled water, no matter how good the brand is, I worry about what's leached into that water. But I'd be interested to know what the students, what products that most surprise them about having toxins.
So for me, I guess it's not necessarily something I was completely surprised about. It's kind of combining with the last question on kind of government regulation. So we talked a lot about asbestos and how obviously it's a known carcinogen and it's something that's very bad for people's health. But the EPA hasn't proven that the risks outweigh, I guess, the rewards in a sense. So it's not something that's banned, and we know like that's really bad for you. So I guess that was something that surprised me, that even though it's known to be toxic to people, it's not something that has, come off the consumer market and has too many regulations with that. But then I guess going along with that, I'm someone who wears perfume. I like perfume. Who doesn't like to smell good, right? I think American culture is a little bit obsessed with smelling good. So what shocked me the most was that fragrance has high toxicity levels. And that's because of the fragrance loophole, if you will. And so that again goes along with question 2. It's not something that's necessarily regulated on the market. So you could be wearing something with the ingredient listed as fragrance, And hidden behind that could be a whole bunch of chemicals that you don't know about, because that's all that's required for a company to list on something with fragrance in it. So for me, that was really shocking. And that was something that surprised me a lot, kind of things that are hidden behind toxicity and how it's kind of covered up in a way. And that's obviously in products that aren't being regulated and that we use regularly. So that's something that surprised me.
For me personally, I really looked into like the cleaning products that we use, and kind of right now being in the midst of a pandemic, everyone's, clean, clean, clean. But then we take a look at what we're cleaning with. I know like even like Clorox wipes and like Lysol disinfectant spray, like that's huge right now. Like everyone's encouraging you to like in the dorms to clean the handles, to clean like the sink, the light switches, like everything repeatedly. But like you're cleaning these products, or using these products to clean, but they're filled with chemicals. And just for one, like Lysol disinfectant spray, like the number one ingredient is fragrance, but we don't know what's behind that. There's really no kind of justification as to why. They just say companies can list it as fragrance, but there's so much more behind it that we don't know. And kind of going off of that, I've been trying to like wear a mask while I've been cleaning, because I don't want to keep inhaling these products, because you don't really know what the long-term effects. And like Professor Stone said, they don't really notice anything until someone reports it or someone makes a complaint. It's deemed, healthy and okay until a problem happens. And then there's kind of to take it back and realize, okay, what's wrong with this product and why? And can we still use it on the consumer level, or should it be banned? And I think there's a lot of issues with that. So for me, it was kind of like the cleaning products. Like we think those are safe and those are going to keep us healthy by, removing germs and bacteria, but we're putting ourselves at risk for a whole bunch of chemical exposures.
And I'd kind of like to shift gears at this point and just ask this question for the students. By now, I know myself, and I'm sure the audience is wondering, how can we know, what are some good ways to learn whether the products we are using are dangerous or not?
For me personally, we talked about using like the Think Dirty app. It's a simple app that anyone can download on your phone. It's free. And you just kind of scan barcodes on products, or if the barcode doesn't work a lot of times, you can just type a product name in, and it has like a rating. So a lot of the products that I was using were like 7s, 8s, 9s, which is higher on like the toxicity scale, which kind of shows how bad essentially these products are in our lives. I mean, there's really no way, because you can't avoid every single toxin and chemical in the world. It's just impossible. But what I've been kind of taking this as is just going through my products and, looking what kind of ingredients are in them. Even if you kind of look at even like a Google search of some of the most harmful chemicals in products, you can kind of look through ingredient lists, and that's even simple things. You just look through ingredient lists and then know, okay, this is okay for me to use, and then this is not okay. And then you can look at like the EWG, like they have a whole bunch of list and kind of shows what's safe and what's not. And then the same thing with produce. They use chemicals on that to either make them grow bigger, to prevent pests. So you kind of can look at where you can buy those produce options. Usually it's organic, that's the safest, but really make sure it is organic and nothing is used on it. So it's kind of, you just still do a little more work and a little more research on it, but it's really not that hard to find out what's toxic and what's not. It just takes maybe 5 extra minutes, like running through your grocery list to see what's safe for me and what's not.
Yes, so like Rachel said, the Think Dirty app and the Environmental Working Group are great jumping off points to figure out kind of a rating of toxicity, what maybe that exact ingredient is that's making something toxic. So that's a really good resource to have. And just for me, a rule of thumb, I don't know about anybody else, but for some reason, whenever I'm in Target, I feel like I never have internet service, or I can't kind of connect. I don't know why that's a problem. They should sort it out. But so my general rule of thumb, if I can't look something up on the spot, is I just look for outrageously long, like chemical or compound names on an ingredient list. And generally, if I know people say, like, if you can't pronounce it or if you don't know how to say it, it's probably not that good. Or if the list is like really long and it's filled with things you don't know, I think just generally better be safe than sorry in that moment, and kind of wait on that and maybe research it later. And then again, we talked about that fragrance loophole. I would just say, again, as a general rule of thumb, maybe don't buy something that has that, in its ingredients list, just because you don't know what's behind it. Rachel mentioned, you can't avoid everything, because because a lot of the time you don't even know what it is you're trying to avoid, what they're listing on there. But kind of do as much homework as you can. And like I said, better be safe than sorry in the moment you're trying to purchase something.
Those are such great tips, by the way, you guys. I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, what Lauren just said about if there's a fragrance, that's a big signal that it's probably not safe, just because, you know, they both, Lauren and Rachel both talked about the fragrance loophole, which protects trade secrets for companies. So they, you know, a fragrance can be a combination of tens of chemicals or hundreds of chemicals, and we just won't know if it can just hide behind that single word fragrance. And without that knowledge, you know, you really can't deem something safe. So that's definitely one thing I do to try to protect myself.
Another question that we have for the students, obviously it sounds like you're very passionate about this now. Is this something you guys were always passionate about? What made you take this course and why? Why were you interested in learning more about the toxins?
It was just kind of interesting to know. I didn't really know what to expect coming into this course. I wasn't really sure if it was more of a scientific approach, which it really hasn't been. It's much more of a consumer approach to things. So it's more about kind of like personal research. Like I went through all of my personal care products, like everything I use every single day. And I was like appalled by the amount of chemicals that were in them. And since then I've been trying to just like make adjustments. Like Professor Stone said, you kind of have to do it little by little, because realistically, you know, if you keep buying everything, it gets expensive. So just kind of taking little amounts at a time. Like I just bought a different mascara the other day, which it's a 0 on the Think Dirty app, which gives you the green light. That's okay to use. And I'm just kind of going through, like I'm doing my project on primarily like makeup products, like what society deems as the best for you, but what really is mostly harmful and very toxic. So I've kind of been looking for different alternatives to people, and that's kind of what's been my drive through this class. Is I really didn't know a lot about this before taking this. I mean, you can kind of hear things, but you don't really take into consideration. But my kind of motivation through this class is to educate other people that didn't know this, so they don't end up in situations like down the road where they end up sick and they don't know why, and then it's linked to some kind of toxin. So for me, it's kind of about preventing things for myself as well as other people around me.
So for me, I mentioned earlier in my introduction, my mom is very homeopathic, but she wasn't always. About 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with kind of autoimmune, and again, it wasn't genetic. It was something to do with toxins in our environment. And at that point, she decided to kind of go on the holistic approach. She did her research about what was toxic in our environment at a time where that wasn't really in the conversation, I guess you could say. So at that time in my life, I thought my mom was crazy. I was like, you're crazy, like conspiracy theories, it's not that. But over time, obviously, this is something that has gained traction, and we kind of see it in the conversation a little bit more now. And when I saw this course offered, I thought, why not educate myself and kind of see where my mom is coming from the research she's done that I haven't. So that this class gave me that opportunity to look into that. Her curiosity is what really inspired me to be curious myself. And I'd say that's been beneficial, because I like to think that I'm a person who is very questioning. I don't necessarily trust everything that is, said to me, especially from authority. I have problems with that, but anyway, not important.
Oh, me too.
Not important, but I just thought, wow, how have I not questioned these things before? And this has given me the opportunity to kind of dig into that. And it's been very interesting, the things we've obviously uncovered. Like Rachel said, I've been taking an inventory of my own personal care products, things like that. And just, it shocks me how many things I use in my daily life that are toxic and do have some sort of burden on our health. And in the long term, I mean, I can look and see my mom and see the long-term effects of something like that. So this has definitely changed my perspective on things. And my mom obviously loves that. She loves that I took this class. So yeah, that's kind of what interested me in the course and how things are going.
Well, it sounds like you guys made a great choice to enroll in this course. I know that by now I personally am starting to side-eye my water bottles in my room, and that what are some good substitutes for the everyday dangerous products that we use?
It all depends, because it does take a little bit of research. These students gave you some ideas, like the ewg.org website, which definitely has a lot of great resources and rates different segments of products. And then the Think Dirty app. But honestly, there's no easy answer in terms of telling you what's good. As I said, for the water bottles, right now we're working on a website to try to educate people. We feel real urgency to spread the word. So I asked the students who are working on the bottled water part of the website, what bottled water did you find was the safest? And they said Deer Springs seemed to be one of the best. But again, you always have to think, as I said, without knowing where those bottles have been. They might have been stored in a warehouse for 6 months in extreme heat. So it almost doesn't matter how pure or good that water started out to be when it was bottled, without knowing, where it's been. An interesting thing I just wanted to throw in there that I read in the news recently, not only are our products themselves, the personal care products, can be dangerous, and not just longer term down the road, but they can, we have a lot of, and this doesn't just affect women either. Men also, their fertility is affected by some of these toxins. And your whole hormonal system can be hijacked from repeated exposure to these toxins, even as soon as your 20s and 30s. A lot of people are finding they're not able to have children. And I have no doubt that environmental toxins, especially since we've seen an increase in problems with fertility, I have no doubt that a lot of that can be traced back to our exposure, even when we were just developing fetuses, that we might have been permanently affected by something that was in our mother's environment. But so, I don't have a single place to point where you can find safer products. But what we are working on is providing that to students with a website. We do have a shopping list we've been compiling for things like moisturizer, sunscreen, laundry detergent, dish soap, all sorts of things, shaving cream. Just because it is hard, you want to go into the store and throw things into your shopping cart. And that's what we've generally done. You look for what's the cheapest, what you can afford, what seems to be the most effective. And a lot of us don't have the time to do much more than that. Even though there's an app that's available, as I think it was Lauren was saying, sometimes that doesn't work in the store for whatever reason. It's hard to get reception. So we've been developing a website where we'll be able to have that shopping list and we've been, vetting products for their effectiveness, their price point, and their toxic level. And so that's just going to be an easy reference for people. And we'd be happy to tell you guys that, once that site is finished, we'd be happy to share it with you so your listeners can have access to it.
Kind of for me, with what products are kind of safe and what's not, I've kind of just done some simple research, just kind of like going through and then like looking on like through the EWG website or on the Think Dirty app. And I found like I just kind of switched out a couple of my products recently. And so I found like Burt's Bees, like that for, I think they have a moisturizer, they have like chapstick, and even like a lot of their makeup is only like a 0 to 1 or 2 on the Think Dirty app, which is still in like the green level. So it kind of gives you that go ahead. It's okay to use. So that's just a good range of products that they have. It's not just like one simple product. I also know like EOS, like those are very common products that a lot of people do use, and those are okay to use. So it really it takes a little bit of research, and again, it's gonna be different for everyone depending on what kind of products you're looking for in your life. So it just depends on your interest and kind of where you want to go. Like I spent probably like 10 minutes in a Wegmans once going through deodorant, scanning through, because a lot of those have such harmful effects and we don't even realize it. So I know I switched my deodorant like immediately after looking through that. So, I mean, it could take maybe say half an hour longer on your grocery trip than usual, but to me, the extra half an hour makes sense rather than ending up with a long-term health issue because I didn't pay attention to those things when I was younger. So it really just depends on your personal lifestyle, but you can always kind of look through products and kind of find a category, because usually once you find one brand, you can kind of stick with that, and they have a lot of different options within that to find safe products.
So for me, when we started kind of doing our personal inventories in our class, trying to kind of determine what personal care products we were using were toxic, I was hyper focused on makeup. I'm a makeup person. My mom likes to call me an addict. So I was going through all of that, and I kind of had an aha moment because a lot of the products I was, again, using in my daily life were toxic for me. And obviously that's something that is very easily probably getting into my bloodstream. That's something that could have a long-term effect, obviously, when I use it so frequently. And the aha moment came because, being someone who's very interested in makeup and that sort of community, there has been in the last year or so kind of a clean makeup movement happening and gaining traction. So I realized, I was like, of course they're doing this because other people know that this is not healthy for you. So that's, I guess, a resource people can use. I know like Sephora has their own section where it certifies like what's clean, what's not, but I will also add in with that, like Professor Stone was saying, you can't know for sure how good of a substitute it is, how clean it is, because you don't know the conditions that it was in before it comes into your personal care, I guess. So I guess no substitute is perfect, but like we also said earlier, there's no way to avoid everything. So just going the safest route possible. Rachel did mention some really good brands that are natural as you can be, I guess. And then again, just mentioning, the Think Dirty app, our website as a resource for Fisher students once it's completed will be good jumping off points to kind of figure out what a good substitute would be for something in your life that might not have the best long-term health effects for you.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. These are fantastic resources to use. So since you all started doing your research about the toxins in products, what has been your biggest, as Lauren said, aha moment or your biggest takeaway?
For me personally, you have to be your own advocate, because unfortunately the government doesn't regulate a lot of these products, or like with fragrance in particular, it just says fragrance, but we have no idea what's behind that like listing. So for me, it's you have to do your own research, no matter even what resources you look through, you kind of have to know what works for you and what doesn't. I know there's been a little bit of trial and error for me when I've been kind of switching out my personal care products, but really you have to be your own advocate, and you have to know you want to do what's best for your health. And I know even like telling my friends about this, they're like, I can't believe I've been using this for the last 5 years on my skin. Maybe this is my problem. And, since switching products, they've already kind of seen a result. So you just have to know what works for you, and to really be your own advocate and advocate for a safe environment for not only yourself, but your family and friends as well, because you don't want to end up with an illness and then kind of regret not paying attention to the little details that you see every day.
I completely agree with that. I think the biggest takeaway is you just need to be an educated consumer. As much as you can know what it is that you're buying. You have to do your homework, you have to do your research. Unfortunately, that's just the reality, because like Rachel said, you don't want to be in a scenario where you look back and think, I wish I had. Kind of going back to my earlier statement of better to be safe than sorry. I think we live in a world, or at least a society, where we place a lot on the convenience factor. Things are readily available for us, and we don't stop to question what it is we're putting in our bodies. So I think now's the time to do the research, do the homework, be educated, and understand that not everybody, unfortunately, has your best interest at heart. And then with that being said, I think it's important to share what you learn with other people. Like if you're using a product, like Rachel said, and you know someone else is, like, you need to tell them, hey, like that's bad for you. They probably don't even know. So I think another takeaway has been to educate other people on this, because obviously at the beginning of the semester, I even had a background in it and I didn't know as much as I know now. So I think it's important to really not only advocate for yourself, but for your community and to share your information with other people. I think that's an important takeaway.
I just want to add to that, it is so heartening, rewarding to hear these two young women talk about how they've edited their products and how much more conscientious they are as consumers. And it just reminds me of, I've talked to the class about a student over at Nazareth who died in December from breast cancer that had metastasized to her brain. And I talk about this woman because when she was diagnosed just after she graduated from college with breast cancer, it's very young to get breast cancer, but she also launched into this editing process, this self-editing, where she was looking at her lifestyle, how much she was using of certain products, where she was being exposed, and she threw out all of her makeup, and she tried to take all of these precautions that we're taking, but for her, it was too late. And, it's so exciting to me to get to see these young women and young men making efforts now to protect themselves and their children and even their children's children, because that's how far this can stretch, what we consume now and how many toxins we allow into our bodies stay in our bodies, and they're transported through breast milk, where it's a burden that is that persists over generations. And so it fills my heart to think that that people have some hope to do something to make their lives easier and better. It makes me think of this Nazareth student, and I feel like she must be happy to know that the word is getting out and that people have a chance to protect themselves.
Yes. So unfortunately, we are starting to run out of time on this interview. So I will pose one final question that's kind of a combination of a bunch of different questions. So forgive me for that. Is there any other information you'd like to share with our audience? Is there anything that we can do to start spreading this knowledge in the mainstream media or around our community? And then is there anything that St. John Fisher College in specific can do within their community to kind of start spreading awareness and paying attention to the toxins used in our products?
I think, like I said before, you just have to be your own advocate and you have to just research. I think if anyone were to Google search some of their products, they would kind of realize how bad they really are. And I think with our website coming out soon, that's a good way for Fisher to show their students kind of what's toxic and what's not, and kind of a resource they can lean on. And like, you just have to do your research, because like Lauren and Professor Sohn said, things aren't regulated like in other countries, or as they like we think they should be. So you have to really kind of dig a little deeper and find information that you don't necessarily want to think about, just because you want to protect yourself in the long run. And like I said, I've told my friends and my family, and then they've told their friends. It's just kind of like a chain reaction of events. You tell one person and they tell another, so the word gets around faster. It's even just like simple things like your mascara or like your moisturizer. If you tell someone, I guarantee 50 other people are probably using that, even on the Fisher campus. So if you just tell one person, they tell another, the word gets around faster, and then they know a little bit more about it, because the bottom line is we all want to protect ourselves and prevent ourselves from looking back and regretting not doing anything when we did have the information at hand. So just be your own advocate and do a little bit of research. It might take more time, but in the long run, it's totally worth it.
I would agree. I would say it does kind of boil down to an individual level where you have to do your own research, your own education on what it is you're using. And for example, our first step, at least in this class, was to do a personal inventory. So using those resources we said and going through and kind of bringing to light the things maybe you don't want to talk about, like Rachel said, something that, you don't want to know is toxic. Maybe it's hard to replace, but it's good to know because, again, you don't want to look back and say, oh, I could have, I should have, I would have if I had known. So I think that's really important. And like Rachel said, it is on an individual level. Yes, you do have to look out for yourself, but sharing that information with other people, using your network in a way that's going to better your community and hopefully society. At some point, it's going to make an impact somewhere. And I guess in the long run, we're looking to see that regulation on, the federal level in a way that benefits people and not, the consumeristic society as a whole, and the manufacturers and things like that. So I think, it's individual, but it comes down to sharing what you know and coming into Fisher's, I guess, community and what we can do. Like we said, we're culminating a website with everything that we've learned. So that's our way of sharing what we know and now understand about toxicity in our daily lives. So that's our way of kind of getting out to the Fisher community. And I would say that's a great, again, resource for Fisher students to use. And then once they've learned what we've learned, going out further and expanding that to the Rochester community and the New York community, and hopefully it just spreads from there. So I would say that's one way Fisher can do kind of a better job of learning the repercussions just from their fellow classmates and from the things they've learned themselves as their own advocates. So that's what I have to say on those questions.
What great answers. I don't have a lot to add to that other than, there are also, we talked about products a lot, but there are also, someone did mention sort of adjustments. I always say that it's impossible. We don't have the time or the resources to completely, focus ourselves on eradicating our exposure to toxins. It's just impossible to do. And so it's something like an unfolding, and it starts with an awareness, and it starts with a conscientiousness. And the students reinforce that for me. And as I'm, racing through the store trying to get my shopping done, and I pick up something that I want to throw into my cart, if I don't know it's safe, I wait until I can research that and can find a safe product before I invest in that, because I think we've all started to look at everything we buy, everything we let into our home as an investment that's more than about money. It's much more important than that. So even small investments, even like a chapstick, as we noticed, there was the Carmex chapstick that's going to start to get very popular as the months get colder. And a student in our class, Nina, realized that it had like a rating of a 9, I think, which is extremely toxic. And that's something that you put on your lips several times a day. You're licking your lips, you're ingesting it directly. People don't also think about the products that they put on their skin are absorbed very readily into your bloodstream. And that's something that I really wanted to leave with listeners today, is that anything you put on your skin can be just as dangerous to you as swallowing or breathing it. And so to be very conscious of those moisturizers with fragrance that you're slathering on your body every day, and how that is accumulating, the toxins with that are accumulating in your system year after year, and how that may be affecting how you lose weight or don't lose weight. That can change how fat cells are stored. It can, affect your fertility. It can affect your immunity. There are so many factors that are important to think about. But I just wanted to go back to those adjustments and to mention a few other things that are important to do that are outside of being a consumer, but just taking your shoes off before you enter the house, so you're not dragging in dust. I don't think people realize that your home is much more, I think 5 times more polluted than the air in your home is 5 times more polluted than the busiest city street in the US, just because houses are better insulated than ever. Air isn't recirculating the way it used to. Even the foam and the insulation has toxins in it. The casings over electronics are treated with flame retardants. We already talked about flame retardants in upholstery and other textiles, and treatments for textiles like dry cleaning. All of these things just sit in the environment if we don't open a window, if we don't dust and vacuum regularly. And then Rachel mentioned, dusting and vacuuming, using these cleaners with a mask definitely limits how much you're inhaling, running your tap in the water so that the tap that's been sitting in the often lead-lined service lines aren't laden with the sediment that might have been sitting there overnight when no one was using the water. So there are a lot of adjustments, which is something we're going to be including on our website, lifestyle adjustments that people can make as they're ready, that can, over time, limit that toxic burden that we carry throughout our lives.
Thank you very much. This is definitely eye-opening, and I think there are very few topics that are as important as personal health. So thank you, everyone. Professor Stone, Lauren, Rachel, thank you all for sitting in and informing us today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.